For our conversation today, we are covering yet another area, which I always love, fleshing out and filling in the gaps that we've not covered on the podcast over the years. But this one, talking about how to best work with parents and families of college students. So really looking at kind of the broader community that higher ed exists within and kind of the different stakeholders that they support and how to leverage people as partners, the parents of students and everything can really be an asset. So really excited for this conversation. We will start out, as we always do, having our guests introduce themselves and briefly go over their professional background and how they got to be where they are today.
My name is Dave Becker. I'm the CEO and co-founder of CampusESP. And my background is mostly in education technology. Before working on CampusESP for about 7 years, I was with Allison, SunGuard, SCT, lots of different names they went by, for about 14 years. When I left there, I was a senior vice president of product over a student information system called Banner. And like I said, excited to be with you today. So thanks for having me on.
You leading the team there at CampusESP and helping to found it. I always do love an origin story. So if you want to sprinkle that in of just sort of, what led you to help, kind of start this venture and just what CampusESP does.
We like to turn parents into partners. That's our tagline. And what that means is that today's college parents are just very involved and very influential in their students' college journey. And we provide a way for colleges and universities to connect with those families so that they can support those families, get them the information they need when they need it. And in doing so, it helps influence enrollment outcomes, student retention, parent giving, lots of different outcomes that help a college or university. And as far as I know, we're the only company that really does parent engagement as its sole focus. So we're pretty proud of that. My origin story is exciting. I started off thinking when I left Allison, I wanted to create a company. I wanted to build something. I come from a family of entrepreneurs and I was thinking about where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. And I focused on student engagement. And there are lots of different vendors, lots of different technologies around student engagement. And I was talking with some past colleagues, and one of them was in Abilene, Texas. So I flew out from Philadelphia, where I'm based, out to Abilene, Texas. Had a sit down with a gentleman who worked at a school out there. And he was like, you know what? He's like, everybody tries to influence the students. He's like, but the reality is parents are logging in as their students, and nobody's helping colleges engage with parents. I was blown away. I'm Gen X, so we didn't really talk to our parents when I was in school. And I was just like, well, that is a very interesting idea. I was like, Kevin, hold up your glass. We were at outdoor drinking beers at a place called The Mill. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I want to take a picture of this in case this happens to be the idea that I end up working on. And I have that picture. I have the exact picture and location when the idea came up from CampusESP, our pivot, if you will. And the rest has been a journey. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I just love kind of the serendipity or something, just kind of the chance encounter that you just happen to be talking with that
luck of it. The dumb luck of
like
it, Dustin.
Talking with this person at that time, and that that kind of epiphany and everything, because just generally, I've talked about it a lot before on the podcast, of just sort of those really great outcomes that you can have when two people put their heads together and just kind of having a casual little jam session,
Totally.
And everything. So really great kind of origin story there for sure. I love that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like the world kind of gives you what you need. You just have to listen. And so many of us are just so used to just talking and talking and talking and not listening. And this was an idea I easily could have looked past. But it just felt like the right thing at the right time. And now we're at 300 colleges and universities, almost 300 colleges and universities across the United States. So, and we work with 4 million parents. And like I said, it's been a journey. Lots of lessons along the way, but also lots of really crazy, amazing experiences.
Yeah, that's awesome. So obviously, this idea, even though it's sort of came at you as sort of this epiphany, but it obviously resonated and everything. So, at the core of it, because this is really the big question, we'll kind of break this down throughout our conversation here. What makes parent and family engagement so important? Why is this something that is deserving of your kind of full attention and everything? Because I think, my point of view on it, but why I was excited to talk about it is I think a lot of people would sort of support this as like a value, be like, oh yeah, it is important, but like they may not give it its due investment and attention and that sort of thing. So, well, at least just going to kind of start at the top of like what makes parent and family engagement so important.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I think most people, when we first started, really thought of parents as a problem. So the idea of like, oh, parents should be involved in the student's college journey is actually wildly unpopular. And I have some crazy stories that I can tell you around just, how people don't think parent engagement's important unless it's their child. And then they feel like parent engagement, parent involvement is important. But I think the rise of parent involvement, at least before the pandemic hit, is really tied back to the cost of education increasing. And if you look at stats, you can see that there's more and more debt that's put on students, but also parents. So this whole notion that, you need to let students go and you need to let them fail, well, that's just, a lot of families just can't do that. Like student success is family success, and parents want their students to become independent. They want them to have critical thinking skills, but they also want to be there as support if they need or if they struggle. So I think a lot of the parent involvement we're seeing, at least before COVID, was around just the cost of education. And then COVID hit. And then there's health and safety, mental wellness. There's a whole bunch of other reasons where if a student's struggling in college, parents generally get pulled into that. So then you have to try to navigate a whole bunch of other things like FERPA and just a lot of different perceptions on what parent involvement should or shouldn't be. But generally speaking, I think the cost of education and COVID have really increased the level of parents' involvement that we're seeing.
That is a good point. I mean, like I said, I think, caught on like man on the street kind of thing, like a hired leader to be like, of course, we respect and want to involve our parents and all that. But it's like, yes, internally, parents, in the way maybe that they're interfacing most often is in sort of like a negative context or helicopter parents or any of those sort of things. So it's like that sort of like tug of war where it's like, we would love probably like, philosophically or in a perfect world to leverage them as an asset, but they might not know how. And the only way that they're engaging is in sort of the, like complicated, privacy issues or, the parent arguing over a grade or something, like things like that. So it's just such a mixed and complicated bag once you actually start to like crack it open, I guess, to keep that metaphor going. So to dig in with that point, I guess a little bit deeper, like, what are the factors, I guess, that play into like why this is something that college struggles with and, what they can do to try to do better?
Well, a couple things. So first off, usually when I frame parent engagement or parent involvement, everybody goes to grades, right? You just think of, okay, well, what do you get in your grade? What do you get in your test and your quiz? But that's not really what parent involvement is in college. I think the best example I always pull up is financial aid, right? There's like, I don't know what the percentage is, probably 70 or 80% of students get some sort of financial aid, and parents are generally involved with that. If you think about a student, how old a student is, a first-year student coming into college, they're probably around 18 and they're being asked to sign a massive loan document that could impact the rest of their life. And, is it appropriate for schools to say parents shouldn't be involved in that? I think that's kind of crazy. So financial aid is always the tie back to like, okay, does it make sense for parents and families to be involved? Yes or no? So that, I think that's important perspective. What's really interesting is, you go to a college or university and everybody's perspective on parent involvement is different, depending on the department that they're in, depending on whether they have a kid in college or not. One of my favorite questions to ask is whether or not you as a parent have your students' IDs and passwords. And the answer is, when we did a survey of 8,000 college parents a couple of years back, 61% have their students' college IDs and passwords because they're checking financial aid, all the different requirements that they need to be involved in. And this number might seem like earth-shattering to people who don't have a student in college. But when I go out to colleges and I go into a room and I say, okay, who here has a student in college? And they raise their hand. And I say, now put your hand down. If you don't have their college IDs and passwords, very few put their hands down. Most people have their students' college IDs and passwords because it's such a big investment.
You've almost certainly heard of Slate, one of the most powerful admission CRMs on the market. And you may have also heard of HubSpot, a dynamic and robust marketing CRM that is second to none when it comes to marketing and full funnel reporting. But have you heard of HubSlate? HubSlate is a two-way data sync between HubSpot and Slate that ensures consistency of data and information for prospective, current, and former students. Gone are the days of list uploads, checking multiple platforms for the most up-to-date information, or having to pull multiple reports in order to get a sense of your entire enrollment funnel. With HubSlate, you'll be able to work smarter, more efficiently, and without all of the stress that comes with managing contact records. It's 2023. It's about time that you let your systems work for you. If you want to learn more about HubSlate or see a demo, visit enrollify.org/HubSlate. That's enrollify.org/HubSlate, and you'll instantly qualify for 20% off the onboarding fee. Now, on to the show.
Part of it here too that's I think important to recognize or kind of empathize with is like going to college is a very emotional journey for the student, and like there's like a lot of certainly like kind of investment sometimes either literally and or figuratively that parents and families are making as well. So it's like you totally get it, like they want to care for their child still, they may have some money on the line that they're trying to make sure is worthwhile investment and those sort of things. So I think that, is a important thing to understand. And then even just like that reality is like, if you aren't thinking through maybe like smart strategies, it's like, okay, well, in that vacuum, these parents are just using their children's login to basically like impersonate and like, almost going to like steal their identity to go into their accounts. And who knows what they're doing or not doing or whatever. Like, the students missing on notifications because they're not seeing them when their parent goes in.
Totally.
It's just,
totally.
It can get to be a bit of a mess, I'm sure.
You can talk to IT departments at colleges and universities, and they will tell you they get a lot of password reset requests from parents, impersonating their students. So it's almost like if you don't create a way for parents to engage, they'll create their own path. And that's when, helicopter parents, snowplow parents, whatever, moniker you want to use for them, you'll see them on Facebook, and they'll just create their own path. So I think a lot of it is around expectation setting, and parents want to help. You have to give them direction. You have to tell them the best way to support their student. And if you do, then there's a lot of really, really positive results for the college, because at the end of the day, those parents are very invested in student success. And that's really what colleges and universities want.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess in the sense of like what they can do better, like something I've started to see a little bit more is that kind of, acknowledgement of the parents wanting to be involved and then being, these great partners and everything, having that potential. I guess it's almost just like a yes or no question, but we'll obviously like riff on it a little bit. But like, do you see there being a place for like the parent having their own account that they can maybe at least just be kind of in with the community more so than just like, obviously they could just, maybe follow the institution on social media just like anybody else or something, but like that kind of curation maybe of like sort of an exclusive area where maybe they have certain, viewing rights and not others or something. Like, do you see that as kind of a potential solution here?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, parents already have an account. It's a billing account, right? They get sent the bills, so they're used to that. Then the question is what else do they need to help their student? And the answer is very personal. Some parents don't need any level of parent engagement, and that's fine. I think that's great. I'm not saying that they should be involved or shouldn't be involved, but then other types of families really want to be involved and feel like they can help their student. Maybe it might be the student has mental health issues, that might need more support from their families because they're a first generation college student. So at least what CampusESP does is we provide a way for parents to say, this is how much information I want to get. Do I want to get regular newsletters emailed to me? Do I want to personalize those newsletters so that I can get information from me as a first-year parent versus information from me as a fourth-year parent? Do I want to see access to my students' academic and financial information? Yes or no? And then, of course, the student can decide whether or not to grant it because they have control over those records. So I'm not saying it's one size fits all at all. I think it's more about Each family is different. What is maybe most surprising for people who are listening to this call and probably shaking their heads is that students want their families to be involved. And that is a giant shift that I think people don't always realize, that truly students are the ones that look at their parents as partners, and Campus ESP is just filling a niche that helps schools meet that need.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, yeah, on different fronts that like institutions maybe are on kind of like a, or like, the particular like staff members or decision makers or whatever are kind of on a spectrum of maybe being kind of aloof to that fact, or maybe sort of acknowledging it, but not really like giving a smart solution in that area, or, putting in kind of a strategy to really intentionally leverage, parents and families as partners and everything. So,
yeah, I think your word intentionality is really important, right? If you don't do anything, like I said, parents will create their own path. And I just, the world has changed. Social media, technology, even things like smaller family size, parent involvement. There's one stat that we have from a recent research study that we did with our partners, Ruffalo and Levitz, that I think something around the magnitude of like 25,000 parents that were surveyed. And we asked, how often do you want to receive updates from your colleges, from your students' college or university? And 85% said weekly, which is crazy. I mean, because schools are not going to be able to support that. And I'm not saying that's right, but a lot of colleges we talk to are like, well, we don't want to do too much. We don't want to send too much to the parents because they're just going to opt out. And that's never the problem. The problem is how do you scale up? How do you do all these different things focused on student success and teaching and learning, but then also maybe give the parents the information they need to help their students if and when that's a need.
It just keeps like sort of circling the concept of like the intentionality, because I think at best what a lot of institutions do obviously is just like public facing, Facebook pages and stuff like that, and it's just like, hey, we're posting there, like everybody can see it, but it's like, yeah, you're doing it for just like such a general audience, where it could be a student, it could be a parent, it could be just somebody who lives where that college is and they just want to like know what's going on, because they might have events that are like open to all. So like that idea that you could really say, like you sort of like framed, okay, I want these type of updates or this frequency or whatever, like you are speaking to a very clear and identified audience. I think like there's also the complexity, like something I want to ask about with this is like, I think there's maybe kind of a two-prong here, is how you see this topic relating to the increasing number of like adult learners at institutions. Because like in my head, I'm like, well, your students could literally be parents. Like they could have their own children.
That's a great point.
Because obviously the families, like just that idea of like parent and family engagement, where like, okay, me as an adult learner with a child and a family and all that, like, that's going to be kind of a team effort in its own way, in addition to kind of the, traditional notion of like, oh, I'm a 19-year-old student and my parent is like kind of helping me work through everything. So like, how do you see adult learners kind of playing into like the work you do, or how you sort of like work with institutions and everything?
It's such a smart question, and it's one we often think about, because I feel like 15 years ago you would hear about lifelong learning a lot. Mm-hmm. Like that was like a buzzy phrase, and I don't hear about it as much anymore. So it's really interesting how that's kind of gone away a little bit. But typically when we work with schools, especially 2-year institutions, community colleges, the parent engagement becomes less of a parent engagement tool specifically for students than it does like a community engagement tool. So, Dustin, to your point, like they might be helping their student at a community college, but then these community colleges are also sending parents information about upcoming courses and ways to be involved, especially in rural areas. Those community colleges really support the community. So, what does it mean to be a parent or family member of a student? It usually is somebody who is committed to lifelong learning. And of course, that can tie back to obviously adult learning and enrollment, filling enrollment goals that the community college has.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny that you said that because like I feel like I've been like breaking down some of the like I don't know like obviously like with looking back at the year that was and the year ahead and everything like
Mhm.
I think like lifelong learning is one of those things where it's like yeah like people have been talking about it a lot and for a long time where like anymore it's just like white noise where it's like yeah like so
Yeah,
it's
I
like oh
know.
we probably hear it maybe just as much or like maybe just a little bit less nowadays because it's kind of just like yep that is something everybody needs to think about and we've talked about it for a while so like
Yeah.
it is what it is but um and yeah that is an interesting point where I think there's obviously still a lot of work to be done for a lot of institutions around like the parent engagement for their more traditional and on ground students or I guess even like hybrid or online like traditional age students but um yeah that idea that you could be engaging and again like with intentionality where it's just being like okay we're giving you what you're asking for as like the parent family member involved with this child's education but you also are welcome to engage in what we're offering here and I think yeah just even that idea where I'm just like yeah I mean if my wife was like in a program or something I might be like hey yeah like keep me up to date with what's going on or something like we share all of our accounts already of just like stuff with our house and with our kid and like so if one of us is really like going all in on like a master's degree or something that could just be like hey like I'm here to help like if I
Right.
can be of assistance and also just like knowing what's going on at the institution or whatever so yeah I think there's definitely like ways that it'll sort of evolve and adapt with the times I think the work that you're doing and
It's a no-brainer, right? I
yeah
mean, it's a no-brainer. I think. I mean, you've got an audience that is super motivated, that has shown a commitment to education. Why would you not reach out to them? I think people still have this notion, and maybe I'm aging myself with this, of Rodney Dangerfield and Back to School. When he did the triple Indy, and he's like jumping into the pool of like these parents as major disruptors. But really, what they are is they're self-identifying as education advocates.
hmm
And if you can tap into them as adult learners, that's even better for the school.
hmm Well, yeah, and I mean, I think it's just the broader point too. Obviously, like the core of like you starting on this venture was just sort of like engaging and supporting students, just to have more positive experience and everything, and like and whatever you're doing. Because I even seen, I think certain institutions, especially ones who like really court, I think like legacy students and those sort of things,
Mm-hmm.
like if they really are like engaging parents in the right way because I think that's even like the powerful thing where like some of the parents like I went to the University of Delaware they have a very strong parent community in a very
Mm-hmm.
strong like legacy community and I know some of the parents who are involved in their like advisory councils or this or that
Totally.
the other thing like it's purely just that their child is going to the institution like they never went there but they identify enough because their child goes there to want to be like hey let's like put on programs or start a scholarship fund or like these sort of things that it's like if they weren't nurtured as that really positive partner then it's like okay then like there wouldn't be the scholarship fund there wouldn't be these like programs and stuff that they do um so I think that just kind of dawned on me too is just like there's so many really powerful and tangible parts of this in addition to just sort of that like emotional gooey core of like you want these students to feel like they're in a safe comfortable supportive environment so that they can focus on their studies and enjoy themselves find their identity and like all these really impactful things that should be able to happen while they're in their program and not be overwhelmed with stress and not knowing where to go for things or um,
Well,
yeah
the University of Delaware reference is funny because that was one of the first schools I worked with way back before we even built anything for Campus ESP. Is we surveyed parents at University of Delaware, not only surveyed them but interviewed them. And to your point, Dustin, I have one of the parents I interviewed. He is a partner at a Big Four accounting firm, so he's done very well for himself. And his daughter was graduating from University of Delaware. And this parent, he graduated from Syracuse. And I don't know, I don't want to, make it about Syracuse versus University of Delaware, but Syracuse has a pretty good brand, right?
yeah
And he was telling me his biggest concern is that once his daughter graduates, he was worried about losing touch with the University of Delaware. And I was like, well, why? I mean, you're connected to Syracuse. He's like, Syracuse is done. He's like, I graduated there many, many years ago. He's like, now a fighting blue hen. He's like, I'm all about University of Delaware. He's like, if I can support University of Delaware, I can help my daughter because she puts it on her resume. If I can build up University of Delaware, he's like, I can help my daughter. And he's like, there's very specific ways I can do that. He's like, I have access to internships. He's like, but the people at University of Delaware, they want to go through the career, manager at his accounting firm rather than go to me. But he's like, I can pull the strings. And so I remember this because it was a transformational moment for me where I was like, okay, parents as problems to parents as partners. He wanted to help Delaware because by helping Delaware, he's helping his daughter. And I was just blown away by it. And now University of Delaware is a customer of CampusESP, and Syracuse is now a customer. So we know we have both of them. So we'll have to hopefully neither of them are listening right now. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. Well,
great story there.
As an alum of that institution of University of Delaware, it warms my heart to know that like is kind of baked into your origin story and everything. But
yes,
yeah, I mean, I think and again, it's like it even stuck with me, just sort of like observing it, like it was just sort of in the air where it's just like, oh, this is like, a program put on by like, the Parents Fund or whatever, those sort of things. So, and that it's always like very prominently featured during like giving days and all those sort of things. So like they, to an extent, it's just an idea where it's like, even just giving them space, that idea where like, okay, if you've got real estate on your like website for giving day or whatever, like you got to kind of pick and choose on that. Like, what are you featuring? But if it's just like, this is a really big affinity community that we want to make sure is like on the front page or like, whatever else. And even just that clearly like certain stakeholders within that group could just have a really powerful impact in really trying to, identify those people and nurture them as much as just like making sure that like, everybody feels just some baseline, connection and sort of, they're getting served up the information that they want and everything. So
I feel like this is about University of Delaware, but I will say they are experts over there. Their parent engagement team is amazing. And I have one other stat to share, which kind of will put things in perspective, but they do outreach for parent giving campaigns before their students are even on campus, before they enroll. And this year, they have this amazing stat where 10% of the incoming families gave even before their student showed up for move-in day. And it just goes to show you how much parents want to be involved. And, really, University of Delaware does a great job involving all parents, not from a fundraising perspective, but just from hey, here's how to best support their student. But parents want to be part of the community. And, whether it's internships or jobs or donations or supporting their students when times are tough or acting as references for other incoming students and other incoming families. It's an amazing resource for schools that many schools in the past have just pushed away, but there are leaders like University of Delaware that have really embraced it and done some great good with it.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. So, with all of this, and I appreciate you just kind of dropping some stats and everything too, which is like helpful context, but curious if there's any additional like resources on this topic to share that we can include in the show notes. Certainly anything, from your team that you're producing or just other stuff that's grabbing your attention.
Yeah, it's surprising. There aren't that many resources for this topic. I will say that you talk about parent involvement in K-12. There are a ton of resources. And then as soon as you get to post-secondary education, they just drop off. It is completely self-serving, but I mean, you could go to the CampusESP.com website where there's a blogs and resources page, which has a lot of case studies and research, and we're pretty active on there. There's another organization that's called AHEPP, AHEPPP, which is really a community of parent program professionals. That's a lot of P's there. And I think it's ahep.org, I want to say. And they've really been leaders in this space and really advocates for parent involvement in education. Very early on, before we built anything at CampusESP, I would go to their annual conference. Lots of great leaders there, and I would just learn from them. And then we ended up building a technology and engagement system that basically met a lot of their needs. But I would say AHEP is, frankly, probably one of the only organizations I know that kind of engages in the space. And then there were some other ones, but they're more fringe. So I'd probably say AHEP.
Yeah, it's great to know that there's something out there. And just, the idea that if institutions are looking to invest, or just build their knowledge base in this area, there's like a place for them to do that. Because the only other thing that I can think of is, and it's, I think, like, is it kind of fringe or not, like their main focus is, I think, NOTA as like orientation in higher education, that like oftentimes maybe that is like a place where you choose to sort of invite families and things to campus. But so I think that could be the only other thing that I think of that has any sort of even tangential kind of connection to this topic within like the higher ed space.
NOTA, NACAC, NASPA, even ACRO-SEM, if people go there, they all kind of touch on it. And if you're on the giving side, CASE always talks about parent giving as well. But it's very niche focused. In fact, we have, because we have up to, close to 300 customers at this point, and we go to a lot of these conferences, our new strategy in 2023 is to have kind of like a pre-con at the front end of NASPA and NACAC, where we can just do a couple sessions on parent engagement. Nothing, doesn't have to be super detailed, but just to give people a way to understand all the opportunities they have, and doesn't necessarily have to be buying CampusESP. I mean, you can do a lot of what CampusESP does just by using MailChimp and being thoughtful and being intentional, like you mentioned. But it's, to me, it's such a no-brainer to engage with parents and families. I am always shocked when you go to a school's website and there's just no place for parents to go. And I'm saying this as a parent of twin 11th graders. And it is just great that the parents are influential. They are. So when schools don't do anything, that's always the big shocker for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think just a lot of great options for folks to check out to start, planning, their strategy here. And we will wrap up, though. I think you've shared so many great calls to action and final thoughts, but we always like to kind of give our guests the floor at the end of each episode to wrap things up. So what is a final thought or call to action that you have to conclude our conversation today?
I am going to tell a quick story if I can.
Please.
And it's all about putting your perceptions of parent involvement aside. And this is, again, in the early days when I was researching the idea of parent involvement, what it should and what it shouldn't be. And I was talking with a friend who connected me with somebody who was in charge of advising at a school in downtown Philadelphia, which is where we're based. And she's in advising, and I was talking to her about the role of parents and how they can help with advising, and she hated every single thing that I was talking about. And it was just an awkward conversation. She thought that parent involvement could impact critical thinking and independence and actually derail student success. And so I was just trying to end the call on a high note. And I forget what her name was. And I was just like, hey, trying to end the call on a high note, you always ask somebody about their kids. Like, hey, do you have kids? And she's like, yeah. And they're in college. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Or how are they doing? And she's like, they're doing so well, but only because I check their grades every single week. And I was kind of like, all right, thanks. Talk to you later. But that's what happens, which is people want to tell other people how parents should behave. But when it comes to their own kids, they're going to be involved. And for the people who are just shaking their head at this podcast, I would say just look into parent engagement and parent involvement. It is a real thing that can probably help your institution. And it's early days in this area, so you can really define yourself and become a leader. And those are my final thoughts. So, and other than that, Dustin, thank you for having me. And by the way, I didn't say this up front, but congratulations on your 5-year anniversary. That's an amazing accomplishment.
That's the funny thing, though, is I feel like there's still, uncharted territory in this kind of wide galaxy and universe of higher education and everything. But So yeah, I'm appreciative of, folks like you doing this kind of work and being willing and able to jump on the show to talk about it, to continue to give us new and interesting things to talk about. But, I know, and I love that anecdote because I think, again, it gets to kind of the emotional core of this type of work, and just certainly, a strong advocate for anything that we can do to make sure that we're, supporting student success every day. So, again, I appreciate you doing this work and talking about it on here. We'll have ways to connect with you and CampusESP and everything else that you mentioned in the show notes as usual. But yeah, just thanks again so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Dustin.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. Our shows feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Mickey Baines, Jeremy Tiers, Jaime Hunt, Corinne Myers, Jamie Gleason, and many, many more. You can learn more about the Enrollify Podcast Network at podcasts.enrollify.org. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea. Find yours at podcasts.enrollify.org.